The scissors caught the chandelier light 1 second before they closed. A rope of dark hair slid to the marble floor of the dressing suite, soft as a fallen ribbon. The young housekeeper did not scream. She only pressed a trembling hand to her cropped neck and stared at the woman in white, satin smiling above her. Neither heard the door open behind them. 3 weeks earlier, on her first morning in the penthouse, Sophia Ramirez set a cup of coffee before Ethan Cole's mother. The older woman studied her, then said something Sophia would carry like a stone in her pocket. A person's worth isn't in being seen, child. It's in what stays the same whether anyone is watching or not. Sophia smiled politely and moved on with her cart. She did not know yet how badly everyone around her would soon need to learn that lesson. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower above Central Park, and Sophia learned its rhythms the way she learned everything, quietly, completely without fuss. She arrived before 6 each morning. She knew which floorboard near the study side underfoot, which orchids drank more than the others, how Ethan Cole took his coffee black and his silence seriously. He was a difficult man to read. 34 years old, founder of a company whose name appeared on half the phones in the city, he moved through his own home like a guest who had paid for the privilege. He spoke to staff in clipped, courteous sentences. He remembered names but rarely faces. Sophia did not mind. She had not come to America to be noticed. She had come to work, to send money home, and to keep her younger brother Mateo in his engineering program 3 states away. Every dollar she earned had a destination. She was 23, with long dark hair she wore in a practical braid and a smile she gave freely because it cost her nothing. The other staff liked her at once. The cook saved her the good bread. The doorman asked after Mateo's exams. None of it was strategy. Sophia simply treated people as though they mattered, and people, starved for exactly that, gravitated toward her without knowing why. Into this ordered world came the wedding. Ethan was engaged to Vivian Kensington, and the penthouse filled with florists, planners, and the particular electricity of an event meant to be photographed. Vivian was 29 and luminous, a social media celebrity with millions of followers who watched her wake, dress, and dine. She was genuinely beautiful, polished to a high shine, and accustomed to being the brightest object in any room she entered. For the first week, she barely registered Sophia at all. The maid was furniture, useful and silent. Vivian directed her followers' attention to ring close-ups and rooftop sunsets, and the penthouse became a stage. But stages have a way of revealing who actually holds a room. At a small dinner that first Friday, a guest set down her wine, looked toward the kitchen doorway where Sophia was clearing plates, and said warmly, "Who is that lovely girl? She has the kindest face." Vivian laughed and changed the subject. Later, alone in the dressing suite, she stood before the mirror longer than usual, searching her own reflection for whatever the guest had seen across the room. It grew the way small frost grows, silently, then everywhere. At the next gathering, Ethan's mother took Sophia's hand in front of everyone and said the household had never run so gently, that the girl had a goodness you could feel. Two of Vivian's own friends murmured afterward that the housekeeper was, honestly, stunning. Did Vivian see it, that effortless quality some people just had? Vivian heard every word. She heard them stacking, one on another, until they formed a sentence she could not stop repeating to herself in the dark. They look at her the way they used to look at me. She watched Ethan after that. She watched whether his eyes followed Sophia across the room. They did not, particularly, but Vivian had stopped trusting what she saw. Jealousy is a poor witness. It testifies to crimes that have not happened yet, and Vivian believed every false word. For days, Vivian circled the feeling like a swimmer afraid of cold water. She told herself she was being foolish. She was the one marrying Ethan. She was the one with the ring, the followers, the magazine asking for the exclusive. What could a housekeeper possibly take from her? And yet, she began testing it. She would enter a room and watch where attention settled. She praised Sophia loudly in front of guests, fishing for someone to correct her, to say, "Oh, but you're far lovelier," and when no one did, the silence felt like a verdict. She studied her phone's analytics late at night, the little graphs of who watched and for how long, and somewhere in those numbers she had built her entire sense of herself. A person can be adored by millions of strangers and still feel invisible in her own home. That was the trap Vivian had walked into without noticing the door close. She thought about simply having the girl dismissed, a word to the staffing agency, a complaint, even a small invented one. But she knew Ethan's mother had grown fond of Sophia, and Ethan disliked drama among the staff. An unexplained firing would draw exactly the kind of scrutiny Vivian could not survive. She needed Sophia gone, but she needed it to look like nothing. She thought about being kind. This surprised her. The impulse arrived unbidden, late one evening when she saw Sophia eating a quiet dinner alone in the service kitchen, phone propped against a water glass, video chatting with a young man who must have been her brother. The girl was laughing, tired, radiant in a way no filter could fake. For one moment, Vivian felt the pull of an easier path. She could befriend her. She could be generous. She could be the kind of woman who lifted others and was loved for it. The moment passed. Generosity to Vivian felt like surrender. To share a room's attention was to lose it. She had spent 10 years learning that admiration was a finite thing, a pie with only so many slices, and someone was always reaching for hers. So the debate inside her narrowed, hour by hour, to a single ugly point. She could not fire the girl cleanly. She could not bear to befriend her. She could not stop the compliments. But there was one thing Sophia had that drew the eye more than anything else. One thing everyone remarked upon. One thing Vivian could take with a single motion and call an accident afterward. She looked at the silver scissors on the dressing table and did not look away. The engagement party on a Saturday in early June. The rooftop terrace had been strung with 10,000 lights, and the penthouse below thrummed with caterers and the soft chaos of a celebration about to bloom. Vivian asked sweetly if Sophia would help her in the dressing suite. A button at the back of her gown, she said, that she couldn't reach alone. Sophia set down her cart without a second thought. Helping was simply what she did. She followed Vivian down the quiet hall, away from the noise into the mirrored room where the light pooled gold and the door, when it shut, sealed out every sound. She had no reason in the world to be afraid. She crossed the threshold smiling, ready to be useful. Ethan had spent that afternoon not on the rooftop but in his study on a call he could not move, with the door cracked because the air handler labored in June. Through the gap he had been half hearing the household for an hour. The cook's radio, the planner's heels, and twice, the housekeeper's voice in the hall, gentle with the delivery boy who'd brought the wrong flowers and was terrified about it. She had calmed the boy, found a use for the flowers, sent him off grateful. Ethan, signing documents he barely read, had noticed himself listening. He could not have said why. He noticed her the way you notice warmth. Now we must go back several minutes, because the dressing suite and the study sat at opposite ends of the same long hall, and the evening would soon fold them together. When Ethan ended his call, the silence in the study felt suddenly loud. He stood, rolled the stiffness from his shoulders, and looked at the framed photograph on his desk, himself and Vivian on a yacht in Capri, both of them squinting into a sunset, both of them, he realized with a small private honesty, looking slightly past each other toward the camera. He had taken that as romance once. Lately, it had begun to look like two people performing for an audience that wasn't there. He had not told anyone about the doubt. There was nothing to tell. Really, nothing he could point to. Vivian was beautiful and accomplished, and the match made a kind of sense that everyone around him approved of. His investors liked the optics. His mother liked the wedding. The doubt was only a faint static under all that approval, a feeling that when the cameras were off, Vivian's face went somewhere he was not invited. He decided to find her before the party, to say something kind, to try, perhaps, to close the small, cold distance he'd been feeling. He left the study and started down the long hall. Halfway along, the cook caught him with a question about the champagne, and he stopped to answer it. This is the kind of ordinary delay on which everything turns. 2 minutes. 3. The cook thanked him and hurried off. Ethan continued toward the dressing suite, where he assumed Vivian was finishing her preparations, because that was the only place she could be. Inside that room, the scene had already begun. Sophia had reached for the gown's back panel, found no button loose, and turned, puzzled, to say so. She found Vivian no longer at the mirror but between her and the door, holding the silver dressmaker's scissors, the long ones the seamstress used for satin. "You really don't see it, do you?" Vivian said. Her voice was strange, light on top, something cracked underneath. How you walk in and the whole room tilts toward you. The kind face, the little laugh. My own friend, Sophia. My own fiance's mother. "Miss Kensington," Sophia said carefully, "I don't want anything. I only work here. I send money to my brother. That's all I'm here for, I promise you." "That's what makes it worse," Vivian said. "You don't even try. It just happens around you. And I have to try so hard, every minute, all day, and you." She stepped closer. Sophia stepped back and felt the cold edge of the vanity against her spine. There was nowhere further to go. "It's only hair," Vivian said, as if explaining something reasonable. "It grows back. You won't even miss it. But maybe, without it, they'll finally stop." She did not finish the sentence. She reached out, gathered the long dark braid in one fist, and the scissors opened. Sophia held very still. She had learned, in 23 years of being small in rooms full of larger people, that stillness was sometimes the only dignity left to a person. She did not beg, she did not fight, because a struggle with sharp scissors near her face was a danger her body understood faster than her pride. She fixed her eyes on a single point on the wall and breathed, and a single tear ran down without her permission. The first cut was the loud one, a coarse, tearing sound as the blades worried through the thick braid. Then the rope of hair came free in Vivian's hand, heavier than she'd expected, and she stood there holding it, suddenly uncertain, like a child who had broken something she could not glue back together. Sophia's hand went to her neck. The hair there ended raw and uneven against her jaw. She did not look in the mirror. She looked at Vivian, and what was in her eyes was not hatred. It was something harder for Vivian to bear. It was sorrow, sorrow for her. "You didn't have to," Sophia said softly. "I would have helped you with anything. I would have helped you most of all." Vivian's face began to crumble. For one suspended second, the two women simply stood in the gold light, the braid hanging from Vivian's fist, the truth of what she had done settling over her like falling snow. And that was the second the door opened, and Ethan Cole, come to find his fiancée and say something kind, stopped on the threshold with his hand still on the knob. He took in the room in the way disciplined minds take in disaster. All at once, then piece by terrible piece, the scissors in Vivian's right hand, the dark braid in her left, severed clean, swinging slightly with the momentum of her startled turn. The young housekeeper against the vanity, one hand at the ragged ends of her shorn hair, a tear bright on her cheek, her eyes meeting his with a steadiness that broke something in him, precisely because it was so quiet. For a moment no one spoke. The party noise drifted faintly from 3 rooms away. Ha ha! A string quartet tuning, the bright clink of glasses. It was obscene, that cheerful sound against the silence in the suite. "Ethan," Vivian said, and the speed with which she rearranged her face was its own kind of confession. The crumbling vanished. A smile arrived. "Oh, thank goodness you're here. There's been a little accident. The scissors, we were fixing my gown, and Sophia leaned the wrong way, and her hair caught, and I tried to." "Stop," Ethan said. He did not raise his voice. He never had to. He crossed the room slowly, and Sophia watched him come, uncertain whether the master of the house would choose the easy story standing in front of him, the polished one, the one that cost him nothing, or the harder thing that was true. He stopped before the vanity. He looked at Sophia's face, then at the floor, where the rest of her hair lay in a soft, dark coil on the white marble. He bent slowly and picked up a single fallen lock as though it were evidence in a trial, which, in a way, it was. Her hair caught, he repeated, turning the lock over in his fingers. On scissors she was holding. He looked up at Vivian. How does that happen, exactly? Show me how that happens by accident. Vivian's smile held, but her eyes had gone glassy with calculation. Darling, you're upset, I understand. It looks dramatic, but it's truly nothing. Hair grows. It's not nothing, he said. He turned to Sophia. Are you hurt? Did the blades touch you anywhere but your hair? Sophia shook her head. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. No, sir. I'm not hurt. I'm fine, please. It's all right. I don't want to be the reason for any trouble on your night. I can go. I'll just go. And it was the instinct to make herself smaller, to apologize for being the one this was done to protect everyone else's evening at the cost of her own humiliation. That finished what the scene had started in him. Ethan had spent his whole adult life around people who maneuvered, who positioned, who turned every moment to advantage. Here was a young woman who had just been wronged, who had every right to weep and accuse, and her only thought was to spare the rest of them discomfort. He had seen, suddenly and completely, the difference between the two women in the room. One had reached for cruelty the moment she felt small. The other had reached for grace the moment she was harmed. You will not go, Ethan said gently to Sophia. You've done nothing. He straightened and turned to Vivian, and his voice changed, still quiet, but with a floor of iron under it she had never heard before. The guests are arriving. You will go up, and you will smile, and you will host your party, because 300 people are here, and I will not make a scene of that magnitude tonight. But understand me, this conversation is not over. It has only just begun. Ethan. Her voice rose, lost some of its polish. You're going to take her side? Over me? Over your fiancé? Do you have any idea how this looks? I have a brand. I have people watching everything. If any of this gets out, if she says one word, and there it was. Even now, cornered, her first concerns was not what she had done, but how it might appear. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, and Sophia, watching, saw something close behind his eyes like a door. Go up to the party, Vivian, he said. She went. She gathered the wreckage of her composure, set the scissors on the vanity with a small, precise click, dropped the braid, Sophia's braid, on the floor as if it were nothing, and swept out, already lifting her phone, already smiling for whatever waited above. When she was gone, the suite was very quiet. Ethan looked at Sophia, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he truly saw her. I'm so sorry, he said. I'm so sorry this happened in my house. He found her a chair. He found her water, he called. Not the staffing agency, but his mother, who came down at once, took one look, and folded Sophia into the kind of fierce maternal outrage that asks no questions and assigns no blame to the victim. A car was arranged. Sophia was sent home, not dismissed, cared for, with instructions to rest, and a promise that her position was secure. But the thing that had truly shifted was higher up and harder to undo. Ethan went to his own party 2 floors above and stood among 300 guests with a glass in his hand and a smile on his face, and looked at the woman he was engaged to marry, and for the entire night he could see only the scissors. Vivian was not a fool. She knew she had lost ground, and she knew exactly which weapons she still held. She held the wedding, planned and paid for, and announced. She held her followers, millions of them, primed to defend her against any narrative she chose to feed them. And she held the oldest weapon of all, the assumption, shared by everyone in her world, that a billionaire does not leave a beautiful celebrity for the woman who scrubs his floors. The story was too absurd. No one would believe it. That improbability was her armor. So she went on the offensive, and she did it the way she did everything, publicly, beautifully, and with total commitment to the performance. The morning after the party, she posted a photograph of herself looking tearful but brave, a soft caption about how stress and jealousy from people around us were testing her. relationship, how she'd never let outside negativity come between true love. Her followers erupted in sympathy. Within hours, the comments had constructed an entire villain out of thin air. A scheming staffer, an interloper, a gold digger after Vivian's man. They did not have Sophia's name. Vivian was careful not to give it. She didn't need to name her. She only needed to point. Then she went to Ethan's mother. She arrived with flowers and contrition, sat in the older woman's sitting room, and wept real tears. Vivian could always produce real tears. About how overwhelmed she'd been, how the wedding pressure had made her not herself. How desperately she loved Ethan and feared losing him. She was clever enough not to deny the haircut outright. Instead, she drowned it in context, in apology, in the language of therapy and growth. I made a terrible mistake. I'm getting help. I'm so ashamed. Please don't let one bad moment erase everything. Ethan's mother listened. She was not unkind, but she had run households and read people for 60 years. And she noticed that not once in 20 minutes of tears did Vivian ask how Sophia was. Vivian's third move was the cleverest and the cruelest. She could not have Sophia fired without confirming the very story she was trying to bury. So instead, she set about making Sophia's life inside the penthouse quietly impossible. Tasks reassigned at the last moment, belongings moved. A whispered word to a junior staffer that the housekeeper had stolen a missing earring. An earring Vivian had simply hidden. Small things, deniable things, each one nothing on its own, all of them together a slow campaign to make Sophia leave on her own, so that Vivian's hands would look clean. And it nearly worked. Because Sophia, returning to work 2 days later in a plain headscarf over her cropped hair, wanted nothing more than to be invisible again. She did not fight the rumors. She did not defend herself against the earring story. She simply went to her supervisor quietly and said she would understand if it was easier for everyone if she found another position. She would never make trouble. She had her brother to think of. She could not afford to be entangled in a scandal between people so far above her. She had decided, in other words, to do exactly what Vivian wanted, to disappear. Ethan learned of this almost by accident. He overheard the cook and the doorman talking in low, angry voices about the earring lie, about how the sweetest girl in the building was about to be driven out by whispers. He stopped in the corridor and listened, unseen, and felt a slow heat rise in his chest that he recognized as anger, a thing he rarely permitted. Himself, he went looking for the truth, and being a man who had built an empire on data, he did not rely on impressions. He asked the junior staffer where the earring rumor had started. He checked quietly where the missing earring had actually been found, tucked. The housekeeping log noted, inside Vivian's own jewelry case, discovered during routine cleaning. He pulled the building's own service records. Piece by piece, the same way he'd read the scene in the dressing suite, he assembled the shape of the campaign being waged in his home against a young woman whose only crime was that people liked her. But knowing a thing and acting on it are different distances, and Vivian had judged her terrain shrewdly. The wedding was 11 days away. 400 guests were confirmed. A magazine had paid for exclusive photographs. Ethan's company was midway through a financing round in which his personal stability was, absurdly but truly, a line-item investors cared about. To call off a wedding this late, over, what would he even say, over a haircut? It sounded, said aloud, like nothing. Vivian had chosen her crime precisely, ugly enough to wound, small enough to dismiss. She pressed her advantage. She became, overnight, the perfect fiancée. She was warm to the staff, performatively dazzlingly warm, complimenting the cook, learning the doorman's children's names, leaving Sophia conspicuously, theatrically alone, in a way that read to outsiders as professionalism. She planned a surprise for Ethan, a charity gala 3 days before the wedding, a glittering benefit for a children's literacy fund, the kind of event that generated exactly the headlines a marrying billionaire was supposed to generate. She was rebuilding the image board by board, and she was good at it. and Ethan watched her do it with a growing, sickened admiration for the sheer craft of the deception. He confronted her once, privately, late at night. He laid it out plainly. He knew about the earring, he knew about the reassigned tasks. He knew the haircut had been no accident. He watched her, looking for the one thing that might save them. Genuine remorse, the kind that asks nothing in return. He did not find it. What he found instead was a negotiation. Vivian apologized, yes, fluently, movingly, but every apology bent toward a request. Let's not throw everything away. Think of the optics. Think of the financing. Think of how it'll look if the wedding collapses now. I'll make it right with the girl. I'll apologize. I'll even pay her. Just don't blow up both our lives over one mistake. She offered to buy Sophia's silence as though that were generosity. She spoke of love and meant insurance. You'd pay her, Ethan said slowly, to make it go away. I'd take care of her, Vivian said, generously. Wouldn't that be better for everyone, including her? And he understood, finally and fully, that she was not capable of seeing Sophia as a person at all. To Vivian, the housekeeper had only ever been a problem with a price tag. The cruelty in the dressing suite had not been an aberration. It was the truest thing Vivian had ever shown him. But understanding is not the same as freedom, and Ethan still felt the walls. If he ended it now, Vivian's version would reach the buck first. She had the followers, the velocity, the practice. She would cast herself as the wronged woman discarded by a cold tycoon for his maid. Sophia, named or not, would be found, hunted online, her brother's school besieged, her quiet life detonated. In trying to protect her by leaving Vivian, he might destroy the very peace he was trying to defend. Vivian had built a machine in which any honest move he made would land on Sophia hardest. The cruelest squeeze came 2 days before the gala. Sophia handed in her notice. She did it gently, with no accusation, leaving a short handwritten letter of thanks for the household and a separate folded note for Ethan's mother. She had found another position, she wrote, with a family in another borough. It was better this way. She wished them every happiness at the wedding. She did not mention the haircut, or the earring, or the whispers. She thanked them for their kindness. When Ethan read the note his mother handed him, something in him went very still. He had been waiting, he realized, waiting for the right moment, the clean moment, the moment with no risk and no cost, the moment a careful man could act without exposure. And while he waited, the one genuine person in his world had quietly packed her things to spare him the trouble of choosing. There was no clean moment coming. There never had been. There was only the choice, and the price of it, and the question of whether he was the kind of man who would pay. He looked at the date on the calendar. The gala was in 2 days. Everyone would be there. Sophia's last day came before he had decided anything. He was pulled into an emergency at headquarters, a genuine one, a server outage cascading across 3 continents, and spent 30 hours in a glass conference room while engineers fought fires and the world briefly could not log in. When he finally surfaced, gray with exhaustion, and returned to the penthouse, the staff quarters were swept and empty. Sophia's small room, always so neat, held nothing now but a bare mattress and a window. On the sill, left behind, was a single dried flower from the wrong delivery weeks ago, the one she'd saved when she calmed the terrified delivery boy. She was gone. He did not have her new address. He did not even have her phone number. He had waited too long. He sat in that empty little room for a long time, a billionaire on a bare mattress, and let himself feel the full weight of what he had nearly let happen and might still. He had built his life on a principle: judge people by competence, not by the softer things which could be faked. It had made him rich. It had also, he saw now, made him blind. He had spent 3 weeks engaged to a woman whose competence was dazzling and whose character was rot, and he had almost married her because the optics were clean and the spreadsheets approved. Meanwhile, the one person who had shown him, without performing it, what goodness actually looked like. Plain, unrewarded, given to strangers and delivery boys and lonely old mothers for free. had been driven out of his house by lies, and he had let it happen because acting was inconvenient. His mother's words came back to him, the ones she'd apparently said to Sophia weeks ago and repeated to him last night, shaking her head. Worth isn't in being seen. It's in what stays the same whether anyone is watching or not. Vivian was a different person when the cameras turned off. Sophia was exactly the same. That was the whole of it. That was everything. He understood sitting there that he was not afraid of losing the wedding or the financing or the magazine spread. He was afraid of becoming a man who had held the truth in his hands and set it down because picking it up cost too much. He stood up. He did not call his lawyers first. He did not draft a statement or game out the optics. For the first time in years, he did the simple, exposed, human thing in the order a decent person would do it. He found the cook, who had Sophia's brother's college on a video call once weeks ago, in the background of a kitchen dinner. The cook knew the school. The school, after a call from a famous and very persuasive donor, was willing to pass along a message to a student named Mateo Ramirez. And Mateo, protective and wary, agreed to give his sister exactly one thing, a time and a place. The charity gala went forward because Ethan asked that it go forward. Vivian had built it as her masterpiece, the reconciliation made visible. The wedding's glittering overture, 400 guests, and a wall of press and a children's literacy fund that gave the whole thing a halo. She had no idea that Ethan intended to use her own stage. The ballroom glowed. There were ice sculptures and a jazz trio, and a step and repeat banner where the cameras flashed like summer lightning. Vivian worked the room in silver, luminous, magnificent, every inch the future wife of a titan. She had won and she knew it. Sophia was gone. The staff was charmed, the rumors had faded, and Ethan had stopped arguing. His silence, she'd decided, was surrender. She'd mistaken a man making up his mind for a man giving up. Midway through the evening, Ethan took the small stage where a microphone waited for the night's donation announcements. The room hushed warmly. Vivian beamed up at him from the front, phone already lifted, to capture the moment for her millions. He thanked the guests. He spoke, briefly and with real feeling, about the literacy fund, and then, because he was a man of his word, he announced that he would personally match every dollar raised that night and would endow a scholarship besides, in perpetuity, for the children of working families. The room burst into applause. Vivian glowed brighter. This was going beautifully. "Before you sit," Ethan said when the applause ebbed, "I want to tell you why this cause means what it does to me, because of someone who taught me what I'd forgotten." Vivian's smile held, expectant, sure he meant her. "3 weeks ago," Ethan said, "I was a man who judged people only by what they could do, by performance, by the version of themselves they showed when they knew they were being watched." He let that settle. "And then someone in my home showed me the other measure, the only one that matters. Who a person is when no one is watching at all, when there's nothing to gain, when kindness costs them and they spend it anyway." The room had gone quiet in a different way now. Vivian's smile had begun, almost imperceptibly, to stiffen. "She came to this country to work and to put her younger brother through school," Ethan said. "She has done that quietly, every single day, asking nothing. She was kind to every person in my house, to the cook, to the doorman, to a terrified delivery boy who brought the wrong flowers, to my own mother, who told me she has not felt so cared for in years. She never once asked to be seen." He paused. "And she was treated in my home with a cruelty I am ashamed I did not stop sooner. Her hair was cut from her head out of jealousy, and then she was driven out with lies, and she went without a word of complaint because she did not want to cause anyone trouble." A sound moved through the room, a collective intake of breath. Phones, so many of them, were rising now, but not the way Vivian had planned. Cameras that had come to capture a fairy tale found themselves pointed at something else entirely. Vivian's face had gone white beneath the careful glow. "Ethan," she said, and her voice didn't carry the way she needed it to. "Ethan, what are you doing?" I'm telling the truth, he said sensibly to her and to the room. For once, in front of everyone, with nothing managed. I owed her that. I owed it to her a long time ago. He turned back to the microphone. I'm not going to marry on the schedule that was planned. I won't build a life on an image. I'd rather be alone and honest than admired and false. He looked directly at Vivian then, and his voice gentled, because cruelty was not what he was reaching for. I'm sorry. You're free to tell whatever story you like. I won't be telling any but this one. What happened next, Vivian did not survive in the way she'd survived everything before, by controlling the frame. The frame was no longer hers. 400 people had heard it from the man himself, plainly, with the donations and the scholarship still ringing in their ears, and there was no caption clever enough to bend that. She tried for a moment the old reflexes, the wounded eyes, the brave chin, the "you don't understand the pressure I was under," and found, for the first time in her adult life, a room that simply did not believe her. She gathered what she could of her dignity and left, and the doors closed behind her, and the machine she had built to protect herself had finally, at the last, run out of anyone willing to watch. But that is not the part of the night that mattered, because Ethan stepped down from the stage and crossed the ballroom and went out through a side door into a quiet stone courtyard where the city sound dropped away to the place and the time her brother had given him. And she was there. Sophia stood under a young tree strung with small white lights in a plain blue dress, a soft scarf over her cropped hair, looking as though she might bolt at any second. She had not come for him. She had come because Matteo had begged her to hear the man out, and because some stubborn, hopeful part of her had wanted, one time, to be told to her face that what happened had been wrong. You came, Ethan said, and his voice was not the voice of a man who ran an empire. It was just a man's. I almost didn't, she admitted. I owe you an apology I can't fit into words, he said, so I'll start with the ones I have. I'm sorry. You were treated terribly in my home, and I saw it, and I was slow, and you nearly slipped away while I was being careful. I don't want to be careful anymore. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. I never wanted anything from you, she said. I want you to know that. I didn't stay quiet to get anything. I stayed quiet because that's just how I am. I know, Ethan said. That's the whole reason I'm standing here. He took a breath. I don't want to offer you a job, or money, or anything that turns this into a transaction. I'd like the chance to know you, as a person, as yourself. Starting from nothing, both of us, just two people, if you'd let me. The white light swam in the dark above them. Somewhere inside, the jazz trio had started again. Sophia smiled, the real one, the one that had quietly undone a household, and said, I think I'd like that. A year later, on a bright Saturday in early summer, the rooftop terrace was strung with lights again, but for a different kind of gathering, smaller and warmer, with the cook's good bread on the tables and the doorman's children chasing each other between the planters. Sophia's hair had grown back long and dark, though she sometimes still wore it short because she had learned it had never been the thing worth keeping. Matteo, newly graduated, raised a glass to his sister. Ethan's mother held Sophia's hand the way she had that first terrible night. There were no cameras. No one was performing for anyone. There was only a circle of people who were exactly the same whether the world was watching or not, and a young woman at last, fully seen.